She watched him mark another woman, then vanished. The Alpha King hunted her down. Serena stood at the back of the Great Hall, close enough to see everything, but far enough that no one would notice her. The hall was full of people. Warriors in dark uniforms stood in straight lines along the walls. Elders in long robes sat in carved wooden chairs near the front. Candles burned everywhere, hundreds of them, filling the room with warm golden light and the smell of melted wax. Outside, the moon was full and bright, and its light pushed through the tall windows and painted long silver stripes across the stone floor. It was the most important night of the year for any wolf pack. A marking ceremony. The night an alpha chose his mate and made it permanent. Serena had told herself she came because it was expected. Everyone in the pack attended. Skipping would have been noticed, and she did not want to be noticed, not for the wrong reasons. But if she was being honest, she came because of him. Kale Draven walked into the hall, and every person in the room went still. That was the effect he had on people. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair, and eyes the color of storm clouds before rain. He wore no crown, but needed none. The way he carried himself was enough, slow, certain, like a man who had never once doubted his right to take up space. Serena's chest tightened the moment she saw him. She pressed her hand flat against her sternum, as if that could quiet what was happening inside her. She had felt this pull for years, this invisible thread between her ribs and his, stretching across any distance, always pointing toward him. She had never told anyone. There was no point. He was the Alpha King. She was a healer's apprentice who had grown up on the palace grounds. Quiet, careful, easy to overlook. She watched him walk to the altar. She watched the ceremonial elder step forward with the silver blade on a velvet cloth. She watched the doors at the far end of the hall open, and she watched Lyra walk in. Lyra was beautiful in the way that made rooms go quiet. She wore a white dress with gold threading at the collar, and her dark hair was pinned back with small silver clips. She walked like she had practiced walking, like every step was deliberate, and she did not look nervous at all. Serena watched Kale's eyes find Lyra and stay there. She watched him step forward to meet her at the altar. She watched him take the blade, and then she stopped watching. She turned her eyes down to the stone floor and kept them there as the elder began the ceremonial words, as the hall filled with a low, reverent hum, as the moment she had quietly feared for 2 years finally arrived and settled over everything like a heavy cloth. She heard the intake of breath from the crowd. She knew what it meant. She looked up once, just once, and saw Kale lean forward, and the mark was made. Serena did not cry. She did not make a sound. She simply turned around and walked out of the great hall the same way she had come in, quietly, without drawing attention, and no one turned to watch her go. She walked through the corridor, down the east staircase, across the courtyard, and into her small cottage at the edge of the palace grounds. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. The candle on her table burned down to half. Outside, she could hear distant music from the celebration. Then she stood up and began to pack. She did not pack much. A worn leather bag, 3 changes of clothes, her mother's ring, which she had kept in a box under the floorboard for years, a small glass vial that she tucked carefully into the inside pocket of her coat without looking at it too long, and a letter, old, folded many times, written in the slanted handwriting of Elder Marin, the woman who had raised her after her mother passed. She did not leave a note for anyone. She did not say goodbye. She walked out of the pack's territory before sunrise, following paths she had quietly memorized over months, without ever fully admitting to herself why. She crossed into the forest beyond the northern border, and the trees closed around her, and she kept walking. Nobody noticed she was gone for 6 full days. On the 7th morning, Kale woke at 3 in the morning and sat straight up in the dark with her name in his throat. Not Lyra's name, Serena's. He sat there in the silence of his chamber for a long time, breathing. His wolf was restless inside him, pacing, pushing against his ribs like something trapped and unhappy. It had been restless since the ceremony. He had told himself it was the adjustment period, that bonding with a new mate always unsettled the wolf at first. He had told himself a lot of things. He dressed and walked through the palace, and somewhere between the second corridor and the east staircase, he already knew what he would find. Her cottage was dark and empty and cold. The candle had burned down to nothing. There was no note. He stood in the doorway for a long time. Then he called for his best scout. The scouts returned with nothing useful. No trail. No scent beyond the northern tree line. No word from any border watch about a young woman passing through. She had simply stepped out of the world as they knew it and did not look back. He sent his best tracker next, a seasoned wolf named Drace, who had tracked rogue wolves across 3 territories and never once come back empty-handed. Drace came back empty-handed. "She didn't run, my king," Drace said quietly, standing in the center of the council room with something uncomfortable in his expression. "Running leaves signs. Panic leaves signs. She didn't panic. She planned. She knew exactly how not to be found." Kale stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back and said nothing. He thought about the girl he had watched from the corner of his eye for 2 years. The one who always knew which elder needed water before they asked. The one who could name every herb in the healer's garden and its 3 alternate uses. The one who laughed softly at things other people missed, who noticed everything and made very little noise about it. He had told himself she was not right for the throne. Too quiet, too gentle, too much the kind of woman a man could fall toward without meaning to, and an alpha king could not afford to fall. He realized, standing at that window in the gray morning light, that he had been wrong about almost everything. Serena had been in the mountain town for 3 weeks when she finally started sleeping through the night. The town was small and human and wonderfully uncomplicated. The people there asked no difficult questions. She found work at a small apothecary run by an older woman named Beta, who taught her the human names for plants she had only known by their pack names, and paid her fairly and did not pry. She rented a room above a bakery. It was small, just a bed, a table, a window that looked out over the main street. But it was hers in a way nothing in the pack had ever quite been. She was not healed. She did not pretend to be. Some mornings she pressed her hand to her chest and felt the pull of the bond, quieter now with distance, but never fully gone, and she breathed through it the way you breathe through an old injury that flares up in cold weather. You acknowledge it. You do not let it make decisions for you. In the evenings, she read Elder Marin's letter again. She had read it so many times that the paper had grown soft at the folds. But she kept returning to one part, the part she had not understood when she first received it 2 years ago. You are not ordinary, child. You never were. The reason no mark has ever held against you is not because you were beneath the ritual. It is because you carry blood older than the ritual itself. You are of the first line, the original she-wolves, before packs had kings or ceremonies or any of the things men invented to feel in control. You were not made to be claimed. You were made to be chosen, freely, by someone brave enough to understand the difference. Serena folded the letter carefully and set it on the table. She looked out the window at the quiet street below, a woman walking a dog, 2 children chasing each other past the bakery, an old man sweeping his doorstep with patient, even strokes. For the first time in a long time, she felt something she recognized as peace. Kale found her on a Tuesday. He had spent 3 weeks following threads so thin they barely counted as clues, a whispered story from a traveling merchant, a name that appeared in a market ledger 2 territories away, the faintest trace of a familiar scent carried on the wind near a mountain road. He had followed all of it alone, without scouts, without announcement, because he could not explain to anyone why the Alpha King was personally tracking a healer's apprentice who had simply left. He pushed open the door of the apothecary, and the small bell above it rang. And there she was. She was standing behind the wooden counter, measuring dried lavender into small paper envelopes, folding the tops down with careful fingers. Her hair was different, loose, falling past her shoulders, no longer pinned back the way she always kept it in the palace. She was wearing a plain blue dress and a small apron, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had found a life that fit her. She looked up when the bell rang. Their eyes met. She did not drop the lavender. She did not step back. She set the envelope down slowly, folded her hands on the counter, and looked at him with an expression that was not anger, and not grief, and not joy. It was something quieter and harder than all of those. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice was steady. That surprised him. He did not know why it surprised him. He was beginning to realize there were many things about her that he had underestimated. "I know," he said. "How did you find me?" with great difficulty. She studied him. He noticed she did not ask him to leave. He noticed she did not move toward him either. She simply waited, with the patience of someone who had decided she no longer owed anyone urgency. The shop was quiet around them. Bet was in the back room. Outside the window, the town went about its ordinary business. Kale walked to the counter and stopped on the other side of it, and then, because he had been the Alpha King for so long that he had forgotten how to be just a man, he stood there for a moment with nothing to say. Then he started talking. It came out badly, not smooth, not composed. He did not sound like a king. He sounded like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time, and had finally put it down in the wrong place, and was trying to figure out how to explain it. He told her about the nights he had stood outside her cottage and not knocked. He told her about the meetings where his eyes found her before they found anyone else in the room. He told her about the rage he had felt, not at her, never at her, but at himself, for wanting something he had convinced himself he could not afford. He told her that marking Lyra had been the worst decision he had ever made. He told her that his wolf had been in agony since the night of the ceremony, that he was slowly losing coherence and focus in ways his council had begun to notice, that a rival alpha had sent a challenge for the first time in a generation because Kale Draven no longer looked like a man in control of himself. He told her he was sorry. Serena listened to all of it without interrupting. When he finished, the shop was very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "I didn't leave because you broke my heart, Kale." He waited. "I left," she continued, in the same steady voice, "because I finally understood something. My heart was never the problem. I was always enough. I was always worth choosing. And you were afraid of that. Afraid of how much I was worth. Afraid of what it would mean to actually let yourself want something real. And I almost let your fear become mine." She paused. "I almost started believing I was too small for you. I was not. I was never small. You were just afraid of the size of what you felt." He had nothing to say to that, because it was the most accurate thing anyone had ever said to him. "I need you to understand," she added quietly, "that I am not angry at you. I am not heartbroken anymore. I am careful. I am someone who now knows exactly what she is worth, and I will not negotiate on that. Not for a king, not for anyone." He nodded slowly. "Then tell me what you need from me," he said. "Whatever it takes." She picked up the lavender envelope and folded its top down with the same careful fingers. "Time," she said simply. "Go home. Do what you need to do. And let me come back on my own terms, if I decide to come back at all." She went back 3 weeks later, on a morning she chose herself. She wore her mother's ring on her right hand. She carried her bag. She walked through the palace gate without announcement, and went first to Elder Marin's old rooms, which had been kept exactly as they were, and sat there for a while in the quiet. What followed in the council was unprecedented. Kale formally dissolving the bond with Lyra through the elder rites. It was rare, it was politically costly. Rival packs used it against him for months. He absorbed every consequence without complaint and without asking Serena to acknowledge the sacrifice, because he understood now that it was not a sacrifice made to impress her. It was simply the right thing, and he was overdue. Serena returned to her work as a healer, not as an apprentice this time, but as the palace's head healer, a position that had been empty for years. The bond between her and Kale did not roar back to life in one dramatic moment. It returned the way warmth returns to a cold room, slowly, steadily, filling in the corners first. On an evening in late autumn, they stood together at the edge of the eastern forest. The sky was turning pink and gold above the trees, and the air smelled like pine and coming rain. They were not touching. They were simply standing beside each other, the way two people stand when they are finally honest about where they are. "Can you forgive me?" he asked. She was quiet for a moment. "Forgiveness is not really the question," she said. "The question is whether you've finally stopped being afraid of what's real." He turned to look at her. And for the first time in the story of his life, Kale Draven did not look powerful. He looked honest, fully, openly, without armor. Serena looked back at him. Then she reached out and took his hand. The bond between them settled into something quiet and certain, no longer pulling desperately, no longer in pain. It simply hummed, low and steady and real, like something that had always known it would find its way here, and had simply been waiting for both of them to catch up. Hall. End of story.